Looks like the World Anti-Doping Agency added MODC to the prohibited list of 2025. This means war. Vigorous Steve here. As promised, here's your yearly updated WADA-approved doping stack, discussing all of the performance-enhancing drugs and notable over-the-counter supplements which are not included in next year's WADA prohibited list. That's the 2025 version. Adhering to these guidelines, limiting yourself to these compounds technically allows you to call yourself a half-natty because they're not prohibited by WADA, albeit that I can't guarantee you that you're going to beat the drug test in any way, shape, or form. I mean, if WADA wants you to fail, they'll fail you, as there's so many loopholes and discrepancies within the system allowing for the bending of the rules on both sides. I mean, trust me when I say this, athletes bend the rules of the WADA prohibited list all the time, but I'm sure you guys are already aware of athletes, quote-unquote, cheating at the Olympics or other drug-tested sports. Before we get started, as a quick side note, if any of these WADA-approved performance-enhancing drugs or over-the-counter supplements spark your interest, then have a look at my Control F source list on my website, where many of these compounds are already indexed, so you can easily find whatever it is that you're looking for, with discount codes, so you can save yourself some money while staying WADA compliant. Now, there's a lot that we're going to discuss in this video, but in order to be respectful of your time, I'm not going to go into individual dosages of each single compound. I will explain what each compound does, but the dosages will just be on the screen for you guys to do additional research with, because otherwise this video is going to turn into a 2-hour behemoth, and nobody has time for that nowadays. Let's start with the 2025 monitoring program, where WADA lists compounds that are testing for in and out of competition to assess prevalence of use, but they're not failing athletes for these particular compounds just quite yet. Sometimes they list these compounds on the monitoring program and ban them the next year. Sometimes they stay on the monitoring program for many years until they're removed. With WADA, you never really know what they're going to do next. The monitoring program is basically the same as last year, with the latest additions being fentanyl and tramadol, which are now checking for in and out of competition. I mean, I can't imagine using tramadol or fentanyl in and out of competition. If you're suffered from an injury, you should be resting and relaxing and recovering at home. I mean, these are not compounds that we generally use in the health and fitness space or in the Olympics or other kinds of endurance sports. So I guess there's nothing new to report here. They're still monitoring for ecdysterone, which is a naturally occurring ecdysteroid that regulates and controls ecdysis, which is molting, and the metamorphosis of anthropods. It has somewhat anabolic properties by stimulating, potentiating protein synthesis and collagen synthesis through the estrogen-beta receptor pathway. While ecdysterone is being monitored for turkesterone, its close counterpart, another phytoecdysteroid extracted from the Ajuga turkestanica plant, is not being monitored by WADA yet. And let's see, they're still monitoring for the use of gonadotropin-releasing hormone analogues in females under the age of 18 years old. In both men and adults in general, the use of GnRH analogues is completely prohibited. Hypoxin is still listed, which is an adaptogen to offset hypoxia in low oxygen environments, right? Imagine cycling at altitude or climbing a particular mountain. Very low oxygen environment, hypoxin helps with that. But if you use it at sea level, man, the stamina and the endurance boost that you get out of it, whether that's for long distance sports, short distance sprint sports, or even strength sports, very, very, very pronounced. We'll get into the hypoxin dosages a little bit later on when we get to the metabolic modulator part of this video. You see here that all the non-exciting stimulants are being monitored for, with the only one that has a reasonably effect on fat loss and overall stimulatory properties being synephrine, albeit that nicotine, not really being a great stimulant, still has great, tremendous nootropic properties and also acts as a aromatase inhibitor. So maybe we can use a little bit of nicotine patches, nicotine gum to increase our total testosterone levels. Yes, we'll get into that a little bit later on. Now, smart people don't use narcotics, so let's forgo that segment of the monitoring program. And the only listed glucagon-like peptide 1 receptor agonist here that they're monitoring for is semaglutide. Now again, that doesn't mean that semaglutide is banned. They're just looking for it. I mean, semaglutide, also known as Ozempic, Ribocil, or Wegovy, is the only one listed, but there's many other alternatives on the menu. But this seems to be the most popular and the most commonly discussed in the entire world, right? So they're monitoring for that. Don't worry, we have plenty of alternatives We'll get into that a little bit later on in this video. Next on the menu is a summary of major modifications and explanatory notes that the World Anti-Doping Agency published alongside the prohibited list of 2025. But let's just stick to what we know because I have no idea what the compounds are listed under S0 non-approved substances. But S3 Beta-2 Agonists, I'm very well aware of. Here they go into detail about inhaled formoterol being a maximum delivery dose unchanged at 54 micrograms over 24 hours. We'll discuss the Beta-2 Adrenergic receptor agonist at length when we get to that segment of this video, and I already have an alternative in the form of a Beta-3 adrenergic receptor agonist, namely mirabegron, which I already have a deep dive you can find on my YouTube channel. Let's see. S4, hormone and metabolic modulators. Listing, mitochondrial open reading frame of the 12SR RNA-C, better known as MODC, was added as an example of AMP-activated protein kinase activators. Mostly helps with the mitochondria and their efficiency, but it's now listed, unfortunately, on the prohibited list, and that means we're going to go extra hard on this WADA-approved doping stack, because for every compound that WADA includes in the prohibited list, I'll offer you guys 50 new compounds that you can choose from. Bet your left ass that there will be 1,000 compounds as an alternative by the time I'm done with this video series that is updated yearly. Now, they also added elacestrant as an example of an anti-estrogen. They mentioned several Insulin-Mimetics, which I never heard about. They discussed diuretics a little bit. Of course, the manipulation of blood and blood components, as well as gene and cell doping, is completely prohibited. That's not something that I'm specialized in. But when it comes to the S6 stimulants, also something that I'm very well aware of. Here they added in hadrafinil, which is also known as fluoronol, was changed from the S6B class to the S6A class, as it's a little bit more potent than modafinil, purely because hadrafinil has a higher potency to pass the blood-brain barrier and thus offers more of a nootropic and stimulatory benefits than modafinil itself. Many of the modafinil variants are already listed on the prohibited list, and I guess this is a new classification. They added tesofensine to the prohibited list, so I had to remove that from the WADA-approved doping stack that I still included in 2024. So tesofensine off the list. Tesofensine is a selective serotonin, norepinephrine, dopamine reuptake inhibitor. It's classically an antidepressant, but we use it off-labelly to suppress our appetite at 250 micrograms daily or 3 times weekly. And here they specifically mentioned that guanfacine was classified as non-prohibited, which means it's allowed. We can actually include guanfacine in the WADA-approved doping stack of 2025. Guanfacine is very popular in the nootropic space. It's an oral alpha-2 adrenergic receptor agonist that is used in the treatment of attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder, but we use it off-labelly to kind of enhance blood flow to the brain and help with our nootropic aspirations. So guanfacine is allowed, but tesofensine is not allowed, unfortunately. And here they mentioned something about the use of beta blockers in particular sports. I highly doubt that anybody watching is practicing these particular sports in which the use of beta blockers are banned. So let's move over to the actual World Anti-Doping Code International Standard Prohibited List of 2025, which is also known as the We're Going Out of Style and Business, Please Compete in the Enhanced Games Instead, where you can use all of these wonderful compounds and much more list. And we're using the WADA Prohibited List as a guideline of what we can't use, and then we're looking for stuff that we know about but isn't specifically listed in the WADA Prohibited List of stuff we can use and still call ourselves a Half-Natty. Right, Half-Natty approved doping stack. In case you're interested in retaining that title, keep watching. Personally, I'm fully sauced, so this list is completely off the menu for me. I use whatever the f I want, like a real adult, and I don't lie about it. Okay, let's get started. Don't worry, we'll go through all of the segments. For each segment, I'll list which compound isn't specifically mentioned, but it doesn't mean that you're guaranteed to beat the drug test. I mean, if WADA wants you to fill, they'll make you fill, which they actually have a clause at the start of the prohibited list, which falls under S0 non-approved substances, where they specifically mention prohibited at all times in and out of competition. All prohibited substances in this class are specified substances, and I quote, "Any pharmacological substance which is not addressed by any of the subsequent sections of the list and with no current approval by any governmental regulatory health authority for human therapeutic use, as in drugs under preclinical or clinical development or discontinued designer drugs, substances approved only for veterinary use, is prohibited at all times. So basically 99% of the stuff that we're going to mention in this video, prohibited at all times. But let's continue. This class covers many different substances, including but not limited to body protection compound 157, 2,4-dinitrophenol, DNP, and then a couple other compounds which we generally don't use in the fitness space. So basically what you're saying here is that if there's currently no FDA-approved medical application within the United States or medical application approved by an FDA equivalent in other countries, then it's automatically not allowed. Now, if you're an American and you're going to be Kamala Harris about mentioning the FDA, that it's only US-based, here is a comprehensive list of FDA equivalent organizations by country regulating the food and drugs for that particular country or region, right? There's more than the FDA within the United States. Every country or every region has some sort of equivalent regulating foods and drugs. So please stop complaining about it. So if you can get yourself a script for a particular compound that's not listed through some Johnny Walker negotiated medical condition that you may or may not be suffering from, getting yourself a script in a country where this compound is medically recognized for this medical condition, then technically, under WADA's own guidelines, you should be able to get away with its use. And with that being said, the large majority of the compounds that we're going to discuss in this video are not FDA approved anywhere in the world, so keep this in mind. And while you might still be able to call yourself a half-natty if you follow the guidelines of this WADA doping stack of 2025, if they decide to pull you aside for doping tests under S0, non-approved substances, you might still fail if they watch you pee into the doping sample cup with your pants down and your shirt lifted. That's probably the highlight of a doping officer's day, right? Watching genitals urinate. All right. Moving over to S1, the anabolic agents. Long story short, all of the good stuff is already listed. Last year, they added Testosterone Mint to the anabolic agents list. And it means as of now, there's currently nothing really left anabolic androgenic steroid-wise that you can get away with, or at least stuff that actually works. Unless you stick with the established detection times, which are scientifically proven and known anecdotally, which might be a little bit shorter than the scientifically established detection times, or a little bit longer because you use these anabolic androgenic steroids for such a long time, whereas the scientifically proven detection times are usually established on a single administration, right? But we have services for that. Keep that in mind. Testosterone is on the list under 1-testosterone. DHEA is under the list as progesterone. Stimbolone is on the list. Testosterone Mint is on the list. Even tetrahydrogesterone, better known as the Clear, is on the list. And even clenbuterol and several SARMs and steroidal SARM YK11 are listed under S.2 other anabolic agents. The only compounds not listed here are pregnenolone and progesterone, which its anabolic properties can be debated. Pregnenolone converts into DHEA, testosterone, DHT, and estradiol downstream, and progesterone might have some collagen synthesis benefits. We'll address that a little bit later on. But even if you're megadosing pregnenolone at, let's say, 100 milligrams to 200 milligrams daily, it doesn't really offer much of a performance-enhancing benefit unless you're androgen deficient or elderly, which also means you're probably not competing at the absolute highest level where you're subject to drug testing. So let's leave the pregnenolone and progesterone off the list under anabolic agents for now, but progesterone will make a comeback a little bit later on when we discuss optimizing collagen synthesis. Technically, though, they forgot to include several selective androgen receptor modulators, prohormones, and ecdysterones, so I guess we're still in the green there. With the half-natty approved SARMs, AC262536, that's the only one that I actually know dosages of. You have several other oral SARMs. The numbers are on the screen, most notably RAD150, right, which is a modified version of RAD140, better known as Testalone, which is listed. And there's even a transdermal SARM called LY305. Now, most of these oral SARMs aren't really used. I can't really find any anecdotal reports of people using these SARMs. I don't think that they're available anywhere besides AC262536. Of which the dosages are on the screen, but because people have anecdotal experience with it. And the animal models, I believe that there's some dosage extrapolation to the human equivalent dose, right? So take this as a guideline, but please do additional research if you're interested in this particular SARM. There are Half-Natty approved Prohormones, a little bit fallen to the wayside. Prohormones aren't really used anymore. The only prohormone which is still being used is Superdrol, which isn't really a prohormone. That just was a anabolic androgenic steroid classified as a prohormone falsely, right, when it was being sold back in the day. So there's an injectable prohormone called Bolondiol, also known as Anabiol. There's several oral prohormones, including cholesterol, pregnenolone, progesterone, and, all these funky chemical names which are on the screen. And keep in mind that some of these prohormones might actually metabolize into steroidal compounds which are listed. I mean, this is the whole function of prohormones. It's you're taking this orally or injectably in a benign, quote-unquote benign state, and then in the body it metabolizes into something with anabolic properties. Some of these metabolites of these prohormones might actually be listed. Now, I didn't do the research. I just went through all of the prohormones which aren't specifically listed themselves, but it doesn't guarantee that you're not going to fill for a particular compound, as some of these prohormones might convert into a compound that's actually listed. Couldn't find any anecdotal reports on all of these prohormones, so I don't know the exact dosages. If you want to use these, which I'm highly advising against, then, you're going to have to do your own research going forward. And I will say this before we continue, none of these are listed already, and since WADA is pretty thorough with their listings of anabolic agents, I mean, how much of an anabolic effect do you expect to get from these prohormones that aren't listed? Right? Even Proviron is listed, and how much of an anabolic response you get from Proviron, that remains to be debated. So your mileage might vary, do additional research, but I don't think any of these prohormones are suitable to be used to elicit an anabolic effect. Ecdysterones, though, are still WADA-approved anabolic agents. While ecdysterone itself is currently on the monitoring program, you could combine terkesterone with ecdysterone or use them solo, whatever you prefer. And these are the only two compounds that are non-suppressive that you can actually use alongside over-the-counter supplements and lifestyle practices to boost your testosterone levels naturally. And on the topic of boosting testosterone levels, what can we do for the maximum testosterone levels to boost the anabolic response in our body somewhat? Keep in mind that selective androgen receptor modulators and prohormones have a suppressive effect on the hypothalamic pituitary testicular axis and can actually lower testosterone levels and estradiol levels over time. All right, so this is probably a worse combination to go for if you go with SARMs only or prohormones only and throwing the kitchen sink of over-the-counter testosterone boosters at it. Your testosterone levels might still be low and your estradiol levels might still be low because now you're solely relying on these WADA-approved SARMs or prohormones. So I would rather go with ecdysterone and terkesterone alongside an over-the-counter supplement stack to boost your testosterone levels and sleeping according to your circadian rhythm. That seems to be a more suitable approach and sustainable approach than going with oral SARMs or prohormones. And since you can't use a testosterone base or follow HCG monotherapy to sustain intertesticular sex hormone production while using WADA-approved SARMs or prohormones, that basically means that these compounds are completely off the menu unless you prefer to walk around in an androgen-deficient and estrogen-deficient state all the time. I mean, even following a deanabol-only cycle sounds more appealing, even though that's certainly not WADA approved. Again, the only non-suppressive compounds you can actually use are testosterone and ecdysterone, which you can use alongside over-the-counter supplements and lifestyle practices to boost testosterone levels, because these compounds are non-suppressive, and this would elicit the highest anabolic response, which is still compliant with the guidelines that WADA has set in this WADA prohibited list. Here's a list of over-the-counter supplements which are known to increase testosterone levels through several pathways. There's KSM-66 ashwagandha root extract, which lowers cortisol levels and can thus increase testosterone secretion. Tongkat Ali is known to increase testosterone levels. Fedosia gracious is known to increase luteinizing hormone levels, which downstream can increase testosterone levels. Tribulus terrestris, your mileage might vary on an increase of testosterone levels. Boron actually lowers SHBG and might actually promote conversion of testosterone into estradiol, but it will certainly increase your free testosterone levels if taken twice per day. But again, depending on your dietary practices, your mileage might vary. vitamin C, vitamin D3, vitamin E, magnesium, zinc, selenium, fish oil, taurine, and carnitine all contribute to testosterone synthesis intratesticularly. Consider these building blocks in the process of testosterone synthesis. D-aspartic acid and fenugreek might be able to increase testosterone levels. What has worked really well for me in the past was icing my testicles when I was off cycle and taking all of these over-the-counter supplements to boost my testosterone levels somewhat. Icing the testicles really works. There's not so much scientific evidence to prove it, but there's a lot of anecdotal reports of men doing this particular practice and noticing a significant boost in their libido and overall total testosterone levels, proven with blood work. You put an ice pack in a towel, strategically place that underneath your nuts for 20 minutes to bring the temperature down. And when you remove the ice pack, new blood rushes into the area, assuming you don't have a terrible varicocele. New blood rushes into the area. And if you take these over-the-counter supplements with the building blocks for testosterone synthesis and spermatogenesis, then this blood is full with nutrients going into the testicles and boosting testosterone levels and spermatogenesis if you do this 3 times daily. It's a little bit cumbersome, but it works. Some guys swear by red light therapy. I never really done that. Some guys even swear by lifting their butt cheeks up and angling their scrotum to the sun, right? Whatever you prefer. I'll leave it entirely up to you. And then sleep. Yes, sleeping according to your circadian rhythm, at least 8 hours per night, is probably the best testosterone boosting method you can incorporate, right? So if you want to bring your testosterone levels up, beside all of these over-the-counter supplements, just proper sleep will give you the most bang for your buck when you're spending all this money on supplements, right? And icing your nuts alongside of that upon waking sometime in the afternoon and before bed. Sweet freaking testosterone levels. Give it a try. Now, again, with some of these over-the-counter supplements and best practices, your mileage might vary. Some people respond better to certain supplements than other people do. And if you don't want to go through the trials and error process to figure out which of these supplements or best practices are actually working, right? Trying one supplement or best practices for a week or two and then doing blood work in between to see what is actually working. Maybe in the beginning of boosting your testosterone levels, you just stick with an over-the-counter testosterone booster like Gorillamind Sigma, and you combine that with Gorillamind Calm and AR, which contains carnitine, and perhaps Actiplex or Turkplex for your intake of ecdysterones, solo or in combination. Personally, I found that a combination of ecdysterone and turkesterone works better than taking them solo. So maybe you give that a trial run for 1, 2, or 3 months to see how much of a change you can get on your total testosterone levels and how much of an anabolic response you get by the addition of ecdysterone and turkesterone. It's worthy of a trial run. You can find discount codes down below so you can save yourself some money while undergoing this process. And if you're successful, since elevated testosterone and estradiol ultimately helps with collagen synthesis, which is essential for muscle building and the recovery process, especially when you combine that with compounds that stimulate protein synthesis and collagen synthesis, namely turkesterone and ecdysterone, then why don't we try to optimize this entire process with several over-the-counter supplements to provide all of the building blocks needed for adequate protein synthesis and collagen synthesis. So here's the Half-Natty approved protein and collagen synthesis optimization stack containing vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin E, B vitamins, copper, zinc, silica, glycine and proline, leucine, HMB, whether that's HMB calcium or free acids, hydrolyzed collagen peptides type 1 and 3, hydrolyzed collagen peptides type 2, GHK, GHK copper, palmitate GHK, micronized progesterone, and even medical interventions, including microneedling and fractional laser therapy. Now, a combination of most of these over-the-counter supplements can be found in Gorillamind collagen peptides. It's linked down below. Obviously, a GHK copper, a GHK palmitate GHK, those are injectable and topical formulas. Micronized progesterone is very potent for collagen synthesis and overall protein synthesis, albeit that it might be HPTA suppressive at higher dosages. So if you go with micronized progesterone, I would only take this when you're recovering from an injury, when you're out of competition, and you need the maximum amount of collagen synthesis to take place to recover from surgery or a terrible injury that you're now bedridden from, in which case you would also combine that with GHK or GHK copper to help with the incisions and to kind of slowly recover the connective tissue or the micro injuries that you might have sustained, because GHK and GHK copper or palmitate GHK is excellent for collagen synthesis. All of the dosages of these supplements and peptides or progesterone are on the screen. And with that out of the way, part of the anabolic response is having super physiologic levels of growth factors and peptide hormones floating around in the body at all times, which you can actually stimulate with several WADA-approved compounds. Here we see that the erythropoietins, EPO, and similar compounds in mimetics are banned under S2 peptide hormones, growth factors, related substances, and mimetics segment S.1.1 erythropoietin receptor agonists, and then they go into the specifics. But we can still boost hematocrit and red blood cell counts using various methods and over-the-counter supplements. We can provide the building blocks for the Half-Natty approved oxygen carrying capacity optimization stack in the form of vitamin B9, vitamin B12, vitamin C, iron, copper, and then using altitude masks or living at high altitude or stimulating high altitude with hyperbaric oxygen chambers, and then using myo-inositol tripyrophosphate to increase the oxygen affinity of the hemoglobin, allowing for more oxygen transport through the red blood cells without increasing red blood cell count. So you can improve red blood cell count with these over-the-counter supplements, right? The vitamins, the iron, the copper, then stimulating red blood cell production by reducing the oxygen in the environment. Obviously, you don't want to combine that with the hypoxin because that kind of defeats the purpose. So maybe increase your red blood cell count using altitude masks, living at high altitude, or using the hyperbaric oxygen chamber while increasing the oxygen affinity with myo-inositol tripyrophosphate using the loading phase and maintenance phase, which is discussed on the screen. You can go from the loading phase to the maintenance phase once the nootropic and endurance benefits are noticeable. Keep in mind that ITPP is actually banned in several sports federations, but it's not specifically mentioned in the WADA prohibited list of 2025. And then you can use a dipeptidyl peptidase 4 inhibitor, which there are many of, to prevent the breakdown of erythropoietin and other growth factors. But we'll get into the DPP4Is when we get to the growth factor and growth factor modulator segment of the WADA prohibited list and discuss alternative options. Here you see under S2 peptide hormones and the releasing factor subsegment 2.1.1 testosterone-stimulating peptides in males, including but not limited to chorionic gonadotropin, that's human chorionic gonadotropin, or luteinizing hormone, or gonadotropin releasing hormone, or kisspeptin, which doesn't really work, so I don't know why they listed here, but it's still listed. All right, so if you use any of these, you're automatically banned, whether you're using urine purified or recombinant, human chorionic gonadotropin, a luteinizing hormone also banned, but follicle-stimulating hormone not banned. Now, follicle-stimulating hormone doesn't really offer any kind of performance-enhancing benefits, but if you like to coat your partner in glaze, then FSH, specifically a recombinant FSH, but you could also use a human menopausal gonadotropin, which contains FSH, albeit with trace amounts of HCG, which you can still fail the doping test with. So stick with recombinant FSH, Merck Gonal F. That is, if you want to glaze your partner in a love and caring method, then FSH is certainly a way to go. Unfortunately, you don't get any performance-enhancing benefits out of it, but fertility boosting effects, well, you can bet both of your testicles and her ovaries that fertility will go up for you substantially, and thus increasing the chances to get your partner pregnant, completely WADA approved. Now, besides the Fedosia agrestis, which we mentioned in the over-the-counter supplement stack, Fedosia agrestis being known to increase luteinizing hormone secretion and thus testosterone and estrogen secretion production from the testicles, you can also influence the hypothalamic pituitary testicular axis, raising luteinizing hormone and follicle-stimulating hormone levels by reducing your estradiol levels, which is the primary negative feedback of the HPTA, right? Testosterone converts into estradiol, and when estradiol is high, the hypothalamus and the pituitary downregulate their secretion of luteinizing hormone and follicle-stimulating hormone, reducing testosterone synthesis, keeping estradiol in range, right? This is how the feedback works. But if you somehow, some way reduce your estradiol levels, then LH and FSH secretion is absolutely maximized, especially when you combine that with over-the-counter supplements that boost testosterone production. So what can we do to bring our estradiol levels down? And while all the commonly known and medically used aromatase inhibitors are already listed under S4 DOT1 aromatase inhibitors. Don't worry, we'll get to that segment a little bit later on in this video. It seems that WADA has no clue that there's a boatload of compounds out there with known aromatase enzyme inhibiting effects, or at least estradiol-lowering effects. And thus, when all of these are combined like Captain Planet, then we can actually get a very dramatic reduction in serum estradiol levels. So here's the Half-Natty approved estradiol-lowering over-the-counter supplement and aromatase inhibitor Super Stack: vitamin C, berberine, calcium diglucarate, diindolmethane, dichloroinositol, glucophage, better known as metformin, melatonin, tadalafil, Cialis. Yes, I actually have an excellent deep dive about Cialis. Give that a watch so you know exactly how and why Cialis lowers serum estradiol levels. Zinc, nicotine, and their metabolites cotinine and anabasine, very potent aromatase inhibitors, but are included in the 2005 monitoring program listed under 4 stimulants. And then there's several medical aromatase inhibitors which are not specifically mentioned: fadrozole, findrozole, liarozole, and vorozole. And make sure, if you do have access to these, which I can't find on any product list anywhere, that you confirm the usage of these particular aromatase inhibitors, which are not specifically mentioned, with frequent blood work. And the same goes for continuous or long-term nicotine use. Again, it's that potent. Make sure you keep track of your blood work to confirm and solidify that your estradiol levels are coming down and your LH and FSH and total testosterone, free testosterone levels are actually going up. And then with the following compounds, your mileage might vary, but there are some indications that they might lower estradiol levels, or at least inhibit the aromatase enzyme, usually stemming from breast cancer or ovarian cancer studies. Epigenin, chrysin, cumestrol, diazyne, delphinidin, epigallocathodin gallate, fatty acids, genistein, camphorol, luteolin, naringenin, quercetin, resveratrol, sodium valproate medication, and terpenoids. And again, with these flavonoids, your mileage might vary. All of these results are stemming from in vitro studies performed on breast cancer cells or ovarian cancer cells, or several animal models where they might have some anti-cancer properties by inhibiting the aromatase enzymes. If they were really good, if you have some tangible real-world effect, you would expect these flavonoids to be contained in over-the-counter testosterone boosters, or at least in estrogen balance formulations aimed towards women. I mean, diindolmethane, calcium diglucarate, dichloroinositol, usually contained within estrogen balance supplements aimed towards women, but these flavonoids generally are not. So do additional research. If you get some sort of aromatase inhibiting effects out of it by taking any of these accidentally by eating particular foods, great, but I wouldn't search the world far and wide for supplements containing these flavonoids, because again, your mileage might vary. I explain all of these in the videos discussing that aromatase inhibitors aren't the devil, and discussing several estradiol-lowering over-the-counter supplements that might act as aromatase inhibitors. I'll link them at the end of this video. Now, as we all know, preventing the conversion of testosterone into estradiol ultimately increases the risk of testosterone converting into dihydrotestosterone through the 5-alpha-reductase enzymes found in the scalp and skin, where it can contribute to hair loss. So if you favor elevated testosterone levels over elevated dihydrotestosterone levels, then look into these Half-Natty approved 5-alpha-reductase inhibitors. We have saw palmetto extract, pygium, reishi mushroom extract, which can actually be combined into a formula that is very potent in the reduction of DHT levels, albeit not to the point that they completely bottom out. And then there's medical 5-alpha-reductase inhibitors in the form of finasteride, dutasteride, or epinephrine. But if you go that route, please do blood work before, during, and after to make sure that your DHT levels don't bottom out. Start low, build your way up as needed. Because, well, post-finasteride syndrome can be pretty brutal and longer lasting, affecting your libido and cognition for weeks to months to years. And if you're currently suffering from post-finasteride syndrome, please give this video a watch. All right, let's skip over S2.2.2, the corticotropins and their releasing factors, because we generally don't use those in the fitness community anyway. And let's move on onwards to S2.2.3, growth hormone, its analogues and fragments, including, but not limited to, growth hormone analogues as in Lonapeg somatropin, produced by Ascendis under the brand name Skytrofa. Soma Pasiton, produced by Novo Nordisk under the brand name Sogroya. And Somatrogen, produced by Pfizer under the brand name Ngenla, which is hitting the market now. And Chase Irons has the most experience with Ngenla, but that doesn't make it WADA approved. So a growth hormone, right, whether that's pharmaceutical or genetics, is obviously listed here under growth hormone, aka somatropin. And growth hormone fragments, as in anti-obesity drug 9604 and growth hormone fragment 1762191, are also included in the prohibited list. So growth hormone, some of its variants that are longer acting because they're bound to albumin or an HCG subunit, and some of the fragments, which we know actually works, completely banned. Now, there's several other growth hormone fragments which actually have been investigated. That's growth hormone fragment 1 to 43 and 32 to 46, which promote glucose homeostasis, but only in animal models. And then there's growth hormone fragment 44 to 191, which actually promotes glucose intolerance in animal models and is about 10 times more potent in doing so than the full sequence of growth hormone, being amino acid sequence 1 to 191. So these have been poorly investigated. I've never seen growth hormone fragment 1 to 43 or 32 to 46 on any of the gray area peptide websites. Very limited scientific evidence, and I would say zero practical applications for us as people in the fitness community aspiring to be as lean as possible and controlling our blood glucose levels through various different pathways. Because, well, when we get to the metabolic modulators, there's much better methods out there for improving glucose homeostasis in the bloodstream. So let's forgo these particular fragments and let's just focus on what we can actually use, because it seems that everything, all the good stuff, is already included. And for that, we also need to highlight what's listed under S2.2.4 growth hormone releasing factors, including but not limited to growth hormone releasing hormone and its analogues, growth hormone secretagogues and their mimetics, and growth hormone releasing peptides, with a laundry list of examples on what you can't use, completely WADA prohibited. And it means that basically all of the good stuff is listed. All of the growth hormone secretagogues, which we know are actually working, are listed here, besides maybe relamorelin, which I've never seen available anywhere, as SM130686, an orally active agonist of the ghrelin growth hormone receptor, and that acts as a growth hormone secretagogue similar to MK677 ibutamoren, which is listed. Haven't seen it available anywhere. And then lastly, what you can look into is ulimorelin, also known as TZP101, which is another ghrelin receptor agonist, but in the scientific evidence, it was shown that it barely promotes growth hormone secretion. So, unfortunately, under S2.2.3 and S2.2.4, all of the good stuff, all of the stuff that actually works by increasing your growth hormone levels, whether you take that through exogenous sources or you promote the production within the pituitary gland with a secretagogue, already listed. But don't you worry, there's a boatload of methods and over-the-counter supplements which are actually known to increase growth hormone levels as long as you follow particular best practices. So let's get into the Half-Natty approved growth hormone secretion optimization stack. High-quality sleep. Who would have thought, right? Improving your testosterone levels also improves your growth hormone levels. High-intensity aerobic and resistance training, and the growth hormone response is enhanced by pre-workout essential amino acids, creatine monohydrate, taurine, and caffeine. Balanced sex hormone and neurosteroid levels, testosterone, estrogens, DHT, and DHEA. If you have that balance following the over-the-counter supplement stack to boost your testosterone levels, and again, you're sleeping according to your circadian rhythm, then this balanced sex hormones and neurosteroid levels will contribute to enhanced growth hormone production in the pituitary gland. Glucagon contributes to growth hormone secretion. Stress management by keeping your cortisol level low. And for that, we have ashwagandha root extract or Gorilla-Mind Calm, hopefully in your over-the-counter supplement stack, right? Again, it's listed down below. We have amino acid supplementation, arginine, ornithine, lysine, glycine, glutamine, and leucine. And it seems that ornithine and lysine work synergistically with arginine, which blunt somatostatin release. The dosage ranges are on the screen. I would suggest you start low, build your way up, and take all of these amino acids before bed alongside melatonin supplementation or GABA supplementation or both, right? It's entirely up to you. Creatine monohydrate supplementation increases growth hormone secretion. Intermittent fasting, 1 meal per day. Fasting after 4 o'clock in the afternoon, so you're in a deep fasted state by the time you go to bed. Or full fasting, all minimize somatostatin release for the maximum amount of growth hormone secretion occurring at night in several pulses over the day. Adequate protein intake, well, I don't need to tell you guys that. Without adequate protein, you don't have adequate muscle mass. And well, you need to eat a boatload of protein for these cannons to fill out the screen, as I'm sure you guys are well aware. And that also contributes to growth hormone release. Being in a micronutrient sufficient state all the time. Make sure you hit your daily recommended intakes on all of your micronutrients. Low refined sugar intake, low glycemic index, and load foods for dinner, so you have minimal insulin release throughout the night. And again, if you go to bed in somewhat of a fasted state, maybe the last meal of the day is at 4 o'clock, no later than 9 o'clock. If you go to bed at 12 o'clock, then at least most of the carbohydrates are already digested. Your insulin levels are low. You might get some glucagon release overnight. Somatostatin levels are low, and then the ghrelin levels are high, allowing for the highest possible growth hormone secretion. A minimal alcohol consumption, I think that's a no-brainer. Healthy body weight, I also think that's a no-brainer, even though my body weight is far from healthy. I'm close to 250 pounds right now. Proper hydration, make sure you stay on top of that. Clonidine and nicotine enhances the growth hormone releasing hormone pulses at night. Keep in mind that nicotine is included in the monitoring program under 4 stimulants. And Dipeptidyl peptidase 4 inhibitors prevent a growth hormone releasing hormone and a growth hormone secretagogue peptide breakdown. Now, growth hormone secretagogues you can't use, but natural growth hormone releasing hormone being produced in the body, you can prevent the breakdown of with dipeptidyl peptidase 4 inhibitors, and thus the growth hormone pulse when growth hormone releasing hormone levels are high is also higher. But again, we'll get to the DPP4Is a little bit later in this video. Now, I mentioned all of these WADA approved options and several WADA prohibited options, including the beta blocker propanolol, in a video titled The Growth Hormone Optimization and Secretagogue Cheat Sheet. I'll link it at the end of this video in case you want to know more about these particular compounds. Moving on to S2.3 growth factors and growth factor modulators, where we can finally talk about dipeptidyl peptidase 4 inhibitors. And the list is very long because none of the DPP4Is are actually included in the WADA prohibited list. So it's fair game to prevent the breakdown of growth factors by these growth factor modulators. Now, there's a boatload of compounds here, most notable berberine, which is a DPP4I, actually preventing the breakdown of insulin and other growth factors. And this is where some of the insulin sensitizing effects of berberine are actually stemming from. You see here that linagliptin, also known as Tradjenta, and saxagliptin, or sitagliptin, also known as Januvia, are often combined with sodium glucose cotransporter 2 inhibitors. So keep this in mind, right? If you want to use these DPP4Is separately, then make sure it's not combined with an SGL2 inhibitor as well. I think the most notable and most commonly used DPP4Is are linagliptin, saxagliptin, sitagliptin, and vildagliptin. Those seems to be the most readily available as well on some of the source websites. I've always used Januvia, sitagliptin, 50 milligrams to 100 milligrams upon waking when I want to prevent the breakdown of insulin and or IGF-1, whether I take that exogenously or being produced by exogenous growth hormone or growth hormone secretagogues. That seem to get the job done very, very well. And Januvia sitagliptin is also the most readily available from what I can piece together with the online sources. Now, before you ask, I already know that this question is going to come up. Steve, can I combine all of these amino acids, melatonin, GABA, and berberine and sitagliptin, aka Januvia, all before bed to prevent the breakdown of the nighttime growth hormone releasing hormone pulse, stimulating the maximum amount of growth hormone release and downstream preventing the breakdown of IGF-1, again, by this combination of berberine and Januvia being DPP4Is? And yes, you can. I've done this already, and my growth hormone secretion and IGF-1 levels upon waking actually quite high, to the point my growth hormone levels were still elevated. In the morning, I'm talking about 10 to 12 nanograms per milliliter, with an IGF-1 creeping towards the top of the reference range, around 300 nanograms per milliliter as well. Right? Is it as potent as using growth hormone exogenously or growth hormone secretagogues? Well, when you're not allowed to use those, then this is certainly the next best thing. So that's 500 milligrams berberine and 50 milligrams, maybe even 100 milligrams sitagliptin Januvia, alongside all of these amino acids, melatonin and GABA before bed, getting you the highest growth hormone levels and the highest IGF-1 levels upon waking. You might go slightly hypoglycemic during the night, which you probably won't notice because glucagon levels will come up, thus enhancing the growth hormone pulse, which occurs at night. Still, if you're a little bit worried, make sure you wear a continuous blood glucose monitor during the night, like a Dexcom 7, for example, to see if you have tremendous dips in your blood glucose levels, and then suddenly it shoots up because glucagon is being released, right? Adequate tracking of your health parameters are always advised when stacking all of these kind of medications and over-the-counter supplements together. Keep in mind that dipeptidyl peptidase 4 inhibitors not only prevent the breakdown of erythropoietin and growth hormone releasing hormone, but also several other growth factors which are on the screen, including angiopoietin, epidermal growth factor, erythropoietin, like I mentioned before, fibroblast growth factor 1 to 23, glial cell line-derived neurotropic factor, as well as brain-derived neurotropic factor, so you can also prevent the breakdown of cerebral lysin or similar products that have some sort of neurotropic benefits. Growth hormone releasing hormone, like I mentioned before, hepatocyte growth factor is good for liver health, insulin-like growth factor 1 and 2, mechano growth factor, myostatin, GDF8. So unfortunately, by taking berberine or other DPP-4Is, you also prevent the breakdown of myostatin. So all the more reason to increase follistatin levels later on at night through several pathways, which we're going to get into. Again, brain-derived neurotropic factor, nerve growth factor, thrombopoietin, vascular endothelial growth factor, and many, many, many more. So please do additional research. None of the side effects of dipeptidyl peptidase 4 inhibitors include substantially elevated growth hormone levels to the point you get acromegaly, or substantially elevated erythropoietin to the point you get elevated hematocrit and red blood cell count to the point you need to start doing frequent blood donations. So again, we're just optimizing all of the pathways here to elicit an additional anabolic response on top of the over-the-counter supplements and just sleeping according to your circadian rhythm and using metabolic modulators, which are not specifically listed, which we'll get into. But again, your mileage might vary. If you incorporate a dipeptidyl peptidase 4 inhibitor intelligently, you're literally optimizing all of these growth factors that you're producing naturally. And overall, you should have a performance-enhancing effect. All right, that was a complete mouthful. So let's move over to S3, the Beta-2 Adrenergic Receptor Agonists. And there's a boatload of options listed here, none of which we generally use in the fitness or bodybuilding community. Maybe if you compete in drug-tested sports, you're trying to circumnavigate the broad list of Beta-2 Adrenergic Receptor Agonists, and that's why they all included it here. Maybe the only one that we're actually using is salbutamol, albuterol, which is that they have a small exemption, up to 1600 micrograms over a 24-hour period. Don't worry, we'll get to that. But clenbuterol, the one that we actually use and is very popular in the fitness space, is actually listed under S1.2, the other anabolic agents, because clenbuterol actually has some anabolic effects from 40 micrograms per day onwards. And weirdly enough, salbutamol, albuterol also has some anabolic properties from 4 milligrams per day onwards, but that's listed here. Now, that means that the exemption dose of 1600 micrograms per day is about, well, let's say 2.5 times lower than the anabolic dose of salbutamol being 4 milligrams per day. However, if you want to stay WADA compliant, you're not allowed to use over 1600 micrograms salbutamol, albuterol spaced out over a 24-hour period with a maximum serving of 800 micrograms per time, which I guess is the absolute cutoff between the non-performance enhancing bronchodilation dose for people suffering from asthma and the minute anabolic effect that might help you perform slightly better in endurance sports or strength-based events, right? 600 micrograms versus 4 milligrams. Yeah, your mileage might vary if you limit yourself to only 600 micrograms. So that brings us to the Half-Natty approved Beta-2 Adrenergic Receptor Agonists that we can use. Again, salbutamol, a maximum of 600 micrograms over 24 hours. Formoterol, a maximum of 54 micrograms over 24 hours. Salmeterol, a maximum of 200 micrograms over 24 hours. Vilanterol, a maximum of only 25 micrograms over 24 hours. And keep in mind that vilanterol is often combined with flutacosone and umectacine. and a Beta-2 Adrenergic receptor agonists, which are not listed on the WADA prohibited list of 2025. Yes, I already did the research, so you don't have to, even though I don't know the effective dosages because I haven't tried these particular compounds myself, so I don't know how they compare to salbutamol or clenbuterol for that matter. There's lev-albuterol, pyrbuterol, and metaproterenol. And this is like my 20th take because it's completely impossible to pronounce. So let's move over to the beta-3 adrenergic receptor agonists, because let's be honest here, beta-2 adrenergic receptor agonists are kind of old news. They stimulate your heart rate. They're very annoying to use, and certainly clenbuterol causes tremendous cramping unless you really manage your electrolyte and your taurine intake. I already made an extensive deep dive about mirabegron, also known as mirabetriq or betmiga, which is a far superior fat burner compared to clenbuterol because it doesn't stimulate your heart rate like crazy and doesn't cause you cramps like crazy like clenbuterol does. So I already made a deep dive. I would highly suggest you give that one a watch. So here are the Half-Natty approved beta-3 adrenergic receptor agonists, mirabegron, vibegron, and then the following are still undergoing clinical investigation: solabegron, BRL37344, CL316243, and L796568. Right? I'm not sure if those are available. I haven't seen them on the market anywhere, but mirabegron and vibegron are available in several pharmacies in certain parts of the world. And I was finally able to find a source for mirabegron. You can find that on my Ctrl-F source list. You're welcome in case you want to give that compound a try. And while we're on the topic of fat burners, have a look into yohimbine or ribosine, which are both alpha-2 adrenergic receptor antagonists, really promoting fat loss from the lower body, especially the lower back. And you can combine yohimbine or ribosine with something like mirabegron, still stay WADA compliant because yohimbine, ribosine, and mirabegron are not included in the WADA prohibited list of 2025, and thus you're still Half-Natty approved. So the Half-Natty approved alpha-2 adrenergic receptor antagonists are yohimbine, ribosine, and corinuntine, which you usually find in yohimbine formulas. Again, these are all stereoisomers of each other, so the chemical structure, the molecule looks exactly the same, but it might be folded slightly differently. It seems that ribosine gives most people the least amount of side effects. But we'll discuss these alpha-2 adrenergic receptor antagonists a little bit more in depth when we get to the fat-burning aids discussed under S6 stimulants. So let's go up and onwards to S4 hormone and metabolic modulators, starting with S4.1 aromatase inhibitors. Again, all of the good stuff is already listed here, besides two metabolites from Primobolan, which are produced by mushroom biotransformation with impronounceable chemical names. Still put them on the screen. Those two are not specifically listed, so technically you could get away with biotransformed metabolites of Primobolan and use that as an aromatase inhibitor instead. I would highly suggest you to watch the Primobolan deep dive, which I'll link at the end of this video. So here's a complete list of compounds, both medications and over-the-counter supplements with known estradiol-lowering or aromatase inhibiting effects. Keep in mind that some of these characteristics have only been established in vitro studies using human breast cancer cells or human ovarian cancer cells, or several animal models, animals with cancer in most cases. And these compounds are still not specifically mentioned on the WADA prohibited list of 2025, so technically you can use them. Just keep in mind that some of the metabolites, again, I haven't undergone the specific metabolite screening to see if those metabolites actually show up on the WADA prohibited list of 2025. So if one of these compounds spark your interest, please look into the metabolic pathways to see if some of the metabolites still are not listed on the WADA prohibited list and making you fail on your next doping test. So I highlighted the compounds of interest in bold. Here are the medical aromatase inhibitors, or at least medications. You have atamestane, also known as metondrotin. You have fadrozole, afefma, finrozole, glucophage, metformin, ketoconazole, Nizoral shampoo, or there's also oral ketoconazole, lioresal, nicotine and their metabolites, anabasine and cotinine, Primobolan metabolites like I highlighted earlier, roglatimide, pyrrolidoglutamide, and vorzol resivor. I'm sure I butchered some of those names, but let's not spend too much time on these medications because otherwise, well, the video is going to be way too long and the recording time even longer. And then there's several estradiol-lowering over-the-counter supplements and ancillaries. Again, vitamin C, berberine, calcium diglucarate, dichironositol, dinyl-methane fatty acids, glucophage, it's over-the-counter in some countries, melatonin, Cialis, also over-the-counter in some countries, valproic acid, terpenoids like retinol, vitamin A, or THC metabolite, or tretinoin for that matter, and even thyroid hormones can lower serum estradiol levels as well as zinc. So there's plenty of options for you to choose from to get your serum estradiol levels under control, but we already highlighted the dosage ranges of the compounds which I feel are highly effective to lower serum estradiol levels in the segment when we discussed about how to prevent aromatization and thus bring our testosterone levels up, right, earlier in this video. So let's not go into detail again here. Instead, let's move over to S4.2, anti-estrogenic substances, anti-estrogens, and selective estrogen receptor modulators. The only compound not specifically mentioned here is enclomiphene. Now, enclomiphene is a stereoisomer part of clomiphene, which also contains zuclomiphene. Clomiphene contains about 68% enclomiphene and 32% zuclomiphene. So if you take enclomiphene, even though it's not specifically listed, you will still fail for the exact same metabolites as clomiphene, right? Because it's contained within this particular medication. So keep this in mind. Technically, you can call yourself a half-natty and get away with enclomiphene use, but if they pull you aside for a drug test, you will fail for clomiphene 100%. Also, foxaphene, which is not specifically mentioned, and arzocefine, also not specifically mentioned. I believe that these last two are still undergoing clinical trials or are branded but not really available anywhere. I haven't found them on any product list of any kind of gray area peptides or online source ever. And then there's several dietary phytoestrogens with known selective estrogen receptor modulating like effects, but that doesn't mean that these compounds found in several food sources, which is all listed on the screen, is going to impact your luteinizing hormone or follicle-stimulating hormone levels and thus raise total testosterone and estrogen levels downstream, right? If anything, I would avoid these dietary phytoestrogens for an estrogen-like effect, not a selective estrogen-like effect comparable to enclomiphene or clomid or some of the other SARMs listed, right? We're using these compounds to raise total testosterone levels downstream, not cry while watching the Titanic. Moving on to S4.3, agents preventing activin receptor 2B activation, where they mention compounds that lower or inhibit myostatin levels or myostatin secretion in the body. I'm assuming that the mention of follistatin includes the three different isoforms and variants, so that's follistatin 288, follistatin 300, follistatin 315, and follistatin 344. And in case you're wondering what the number stands for, that's actually the amount of amino acids that this specific follistatin isoform variant contains. So follistatin 288 contains 288 amino acids, and follistatin 344 contains 344 amino acids. I discussed decoy activin receptors ACE-031 and ACE-083 in great detail in the follistatin gene therapy video, which dropped in the beginning of this year. Give that a watch if you're interested in these kinds of compounds. And while ACE-031 is listed on the WADA prohibited list of 2025, ACE-083 isn't specifically mentioned. ACE-083 seems to be a little bit more favorable, as all of the injections were performed intramuscularly, and ACE-083 is rapidly metabolized in the bloodstream, whereas the ACE-031 studies were all performed with subcutaneous administration, leading to a systemic effect, which is certainly not something that you want. So with ACE-083, there's a tremendous localized effect in the muscle that it's administered into, leading to localized muscle growth. ACE-083 is a recombinant protein comprised of a modified form of human follistatin 288 linked to the Fc region of human immunoglobulin IgG2. It was designed as a decoy receptor for myostatin, also known as GDF8, as well as GDF11, activins A and B that inhibit skeletal muscle growth and differentiation. ACE-083 is also known as follistatin 288 fusion protein, abbreviated to FST288/FC. Again, you can find a lot more details about ACE-031 and ACE-083 in the deep dive, which I'll link at the end of this video. And that brings us to the Half-Natty approved myostatin and activin inhibitors. Again, ACE-083. The problem is the monthly cost could range between $10,000 to $86,000 based on the medically approved and recognized and studied administration protocol of 240 milligrams ACE-083 intramuscularly bilaterally every 3 weeks. So that's 480 milligrams in total every 3 weeks. Even at the lowest effective dose of 50 milligrams intramuscularly bilaterally every 3 weeks, so that's a total of 100 milligrams, based on the current gray area peptide website costs of ACE-083, that would be between, let's say, $2,000 to $9,000 per month. Well, you can run a boatload of Increlex and then some for those costs, so it's completely unaffordable for anybody out there. And there's several other inhibitors listed here, which I don't know the dosages of. There's a slight explanation at the end of each listing. There's Alzolaprug, Trevogrumab, and Garatosmab, all completely unavailable. Haven't seen them on the Gray Area Peptides websites anywhere. And if they are available, they're probably completely unaffordable, just like ACE-083 or ACE-031. So if you want to improve your follistatin levels or reduce your myostatin levels or have active inhibiting effects in the body, strenuous resistance training gets the job done. Prolonged fasting over 72 hours actually increases circulating follistatin levels, but doesn't change myostatin levels. Also increases growth hormone levels, partially by increasing ghrelin secretion. Sleep regulates circulating follistatin levels. So sleep, again, increases testosterone levels, increases growth hormone levels, and improves regulating follistatin levels, which inhibit myostatin. So the more you sleep, the better you grow. Who would have thought? Androgen deficiency modulates myostatin and follistatin levels and prevents sarcopenia. Again, look into the segment discussing the over-the-counter supplements and WADA-approved compounds which are known to increase testosterone, estradiol, DHT, DHEA, etc. Vitamin D and several of its metabolites reduce myostatin levels, so good to supplement with that, besides the fact that vitamin D enhances testosterone production. Epicatechin reduces myostatin levels and increases follistatin levels if you take 1 milligram to 2 milligrams per 1 kilogram of body weight daily, so you have to megadose that to a certain extent. SLU-cysteine found in garlic reduces myostatin levels. Unfortunately, I was not able to find how much SLU-cysteine you actually need to consume or how much garlic you actually need to consume for myostatin levels to be reduced. And again, if you eat a boatload of garlic, you're probably not making it pleasant for everybody else in your immediate surrounding. Although garlic does contain compounds which prevent TMAO formation, but it's probably better to take those compounds in supplemental form. And then not only does leucine, HMB free acid or HMB calcium and creatine monohydrate improve collagen synthesis and protein synthesis in the body, they also inhibit myostatin-induced muscular atrophy. So why not supplement with leucine, HMB, and creatine monohydrate? And again, creatine monohydrate, also good for sleep. So it's a no-brainer to add all of these in at effective dosages mentioned on the screen. And I discuss all of these myostatin-inhibiting compounds and follistatin-increasing compounds in great detail in the video titled, Is Myostatin Blocking Your Gains? I'll link it at the end of this one in case you're interested and you want to know more about these compounds. And it finally brings us to S4.4 metabolic modulators, which is one of my specialties. And here you clearly see that MODC, meaning that it's war from this point onwards, because MODC is one of my favorite compounds, is now listed under S4.4.1 alongside APK, ICAR, Cardarine, SR9009, and SR9011. Luckily, since this is my specialty, I got a boatload of other metabolic modulators that are still WADA compliant, not included in the prohibited list, and still allows you to be called a half-natty. Here is the half-natty approved metabolic modulator list of doom. 5-amino-1-MQ in combination with NAD+, whether that's coming from nicotinamide mononucleotide supplementation or nicotinamide riboside supplementation or intravenous nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide administration. I'll leave that entirely up to you. Thyroxine, we'll address that a little bit later on. Soboterone, GC1, we'll discuss that a little bit later on as well when we get to the thyroid part of this video. L-carnitine, whether that's oral or injectable. Injectable methionine, inositol, and choline blends, great for fat loss. SLU-PP-332, methylene blue, JBSNF000000000088. Probably too many zeros, but you get the idea. Elamipretide, also known as Bendavia, mitochondria-targeted peptide SBT20, abbreviated to SS20, mitochondria-targeted antioxidant KQ1, mitochondria-targeted antioxidant metoquinone, also known as MitoQ, Bemetil, with a boatload of different names, including Metaprot. And again, make sure you take 2 weeks after 8 250 milligram dosages. So whether you take Bemetil 1,000 milligrams for 2 days in a row, that's 2,000 milligrams in total, or eight servings of 250 milligrams, or you space all of those out, that's entirely up to you. I discussed this in the Optimize Endurance deep dive video series. I'll link them down below, right? There's a boatload of those videos in that series discussing Bemetil, hypoxin, amoxapine, and a boatload of other compounds. So again, hypoxin is listed even though it's included in the 2005 monitoring program under 3 hypoxin. Amoxapine, diisopropylamine dichloroacetate, which I'll make a deep dive about very, very soon because that's what I'm experimenting with. Great compounds. Next level pumps and stamina in the gym. Tromethamine, abbreviated to TAM, myoinositol tripyrophosphate, like we alluded to in the oxygen carry capacity segment of this video. Let's see, metformin, again, that could fall under S4.4.1 activators of the AMP activated protein kinase, or S4.4.2 insulins and insulin-mimetics, but I don't know anybody out there that ever failed for metformin, so let's keep it in. There's several sodium glucose cotransporter 2 inhibitors, including empagliflozin, better known as Jardiance, and dapagliflozin, canagliflozin, ertugliflozin, and sortigliflozin. The most commonly used and readily available is empagliflozin. That's the one that I have the most experience with. And, BAM15, another mitochondrial coupler that you could use as an alternative to DNP, but DNP is shit. And I'm sure BAM15, after doing research, will turn out to be shit also. So we're not going to go into dosages here. Now, don't you worry, we're not quite done with this segment of metabolic modulation just quite yet. While semaglutide is included in the monitoring program, again, you're not failing for semaglutide if you're testing for it, you're just monitoring for it. But that would mean that semaglutide and some of the Glucagon-Like peptide 1 receptor agonists would technically fall under S4.4.2 insulin and insulin-mimetics, because Glucagon-Like peptide 1 receptor agonists are actually insulinotropic and promote the insulin secretion from the pancreas. So let's include them here under the Half-Natty approved insulin-mimetics and Glucagon-Like peptide 1 receptor agonists, which again could fall under S4.4.2 insulins and insulin-mimetics, but so far nobody has ever failed for GLP-1 or some of the other compounds listed here, including vinyl sulfate, which actually is an insulin-mimetic, activates the insulin receptor, is included in many over-the-counter glucose disposal agents, usually in combination with chromium and some sort of cinnamon bark extract and berberine. We have liraglutide, dulaglutide, semaglutide, which is included in the 2025 monitoring program under 6 semaglutide. There's tirzepatide, which agonizes both the Glucagon-Like peptide 1 receptors and the gastric inhibitory polypeptide receptors, also known as the glucose-dependent insulinotropic receptors. Retatrutide, which activates the GLP-1, GIP, and glucagon receptor. Great combination medication. Retatrutide is the shitnet for appetite suppression. Glucagon obviously doesn't really mimic insulin-like effects. Actually, it opposes insulin effects. But since retatrutide is listed here, we might as well list glucagon here as well. There's udlixin, a GLP-1 receptor agonist. Abiglutide, another GLP-1. Exenatide, GLP-1. Mazdutide activates the GLP-1 receptors and the glucagon receptors. Sorvidutide, GLP-1, Tonzium, a GLP-1, and then there's carglulinitide, which is an amylin receptor agonist. Again, the classification of these compounds might be a little bit speculatory and dubious, but I felt that they were all applicable to be listed here because they all have appetite-suppressing effects. Now, I discuss all of these metabolic modulators, whether they are mitochondrial support aids, or stimulants, or fat burners, or appetite suppressants, or insulin-mimetics, or GLP-1s, right, glucagon, etc. I discuss all of that in the ultimate no-stimulant fat burner stack, which you can already watch on my YouTube channel. I think I dropped it right before this one. In case you want to know more about all of these compounds individually, I go into great depth in that particular deep dive. Give it a watch, you won't be disappointed. And here you see that they included meldonium and trimethazidine, but I think I offered plenty of alternatives regarding metabolic modulation in the segment we discussed previously. So let's move over to S5 diuretics and masking agents, where all of the commonly known and readily available diuretics are already listed. Lasix is included, aldactone is included, diazide containing hydrochlorothiazide and trimetrine is included. You know what's not included? Mercury. But it's not the 90s anymore, and we've learned a lot since then, so we haven't used mercury since a long, long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Isn't that right, Mr. Nichols? Now, luckily, there are plenty of ways to promote diuresis, which are all WADA approved. Just make sure you don't use mirabegron, which relaxes the bladder, resulting in more urine retention by activating the beta-3 adrenergic receptors on the bladder, and that kind of defeats the purpose of having the maximum amount of diuresis. So here's the Half-Natty approved diuretic stack, high sodium intake and electrolyte management. Also make sure you have high water intake to make sure that you're always flushing, reducing aldosterone levels. Caffeine can promote diuresis, even though it's included in the monitoring program under 4 stimulants. Then there's green tea, hibiscus tea, nettle leaf tea. Alcohol, can't recommend it, but it does promote diuresis. Parsley, asparagus, celery, cranberries, and then various extracts, which are usually found in diuresis formulas. Way too long, way too many to mention all of them, but it's good to look into. Usually you have some sort of expel formula that contains a combination of most of these, usually also containing a little bit of tea extract, and that promotes the most amount of diuresis if you take a copious amounts of tablets before bed when you're laying flat, or you're putting bricks or, books underneath the foot end of your bed, allowing the foot end of your bed to be raised slightly, and this way all of the water will easily pass through your kidneys, again promoting diuresis overnight. Yeah, a combination of telmisartan, tamsulosin, and empagliflozin before bed, empty. You're welcome. The way this works is as follows. Telmisartan is an angiotensin receptor blocker. If you take that before bed, it modulates the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, promoting for a good amount of water and overall electrolyte excretion. Tamsulosin is a benign prostate enlargement medication that relaxes the urethra and allows for more urine flow through the prostate. And then empagliflozin is again, sodium glucose cotransporter 2 inhibitor, preventing the reuptake of sodium and glucose in combination with telmisartan modulating the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, promotes a good amount of diuresis, especially if you were on top of your electrolyte intake and your water intake and you kept that consistently high up until the moment you slept in a sloped bed, again with bricks or books underneath the foot end of your bed, allowing for proper water distribution through the kidneys, which is now being promoted with this combination of telmisartan, tamsulosin, and empagliflozin. It's literally magic, and it's all WADA compliant. Again, you're welcome. And then here under prohibited methods, whether that's M1 manipulation of blood and blood components, M2 chemical and physical manipulation, even though they do specifically mention something under M2.1 tampering or attempting to tamper to alter the integrity or validity of the samples collected during doping control, including but not limited to sample substitution or adulteration, like the addition of proteases to the urine sample. They don't specifically mention that you can't bribe your doping officer. Well, they're only human, so maybe with the donation of a bottle of wine, a good bottle of wine, right, at least $50 upwards, or Johnny Walker Double Black. Yes, that seems to be the going rate here in Asia, but you didn't hear that from me. Bribing your doping officer is always a possibility, right? It depends on your skills and your ability to communicate to maybe allow you to get away with tampering of the doping sample, making them look the other way while you pour the urine of your friend into the sample cup. There's always ways, right? It's not specifically mentioned that you can't bribe your doping officer, so this is always an option. If you're in the know and you have great social skills, because you can only try it once, and you better make sure that it works. All right, moving over to S6 stimulants. As always, all the good stuff is already listed. MDMA is listed, amphetamines like Adderall is listed, bromantane, cocaine, lisdexamphetamine, Vyvanse, modafinil, Provigil, phentermine, DMAA, found in many a pre-workout formula back in the day, ephedrine or pseudoephedrine formulations, methylphenidate, Ritalin, sibutramine, etc., etc., etc. Even antidepressants like selegiline and tesofensine are listed. Surprisingly, dextroamphetamines found in Adderall and Dexedrine, it's not specifically mentioned unless they mention it under a different name. So I guess all your Dexedrine junkies are still in the green. In my research of looking for WADA-approved alpha-2 adrenergic receptor agonists and antagonists while I was researching yohimbine and ribosine, I made a list of over-the-counter supplements and medications which are known to increase norepinephrine and epinephrine levels both systemically as well as in the brain. Norepinephrine and epinephrine are also known as noradrenaline and adrenaline. These medications might offer a stimulatory effect, blunting your appetite, promoting fat loss, and raising your overall energy levels throughout the day by raising norepinephrine and epinephrine levels throughout your waking hours. Now, that obviously means that you can't take these medications or over-the-counter supplements too late in the day. So if you want to use something pre-workout besides caffeine, if you train later in the day, most of these medications and over-the-counter supplements are kind of off the menu because otherwise you're probably going to interfere with your over-the-counter supplement stack to boost your total testosterone levels, boosting your growth hormone levels, your IGF-1 levels, your follistatin levels, and bring your myostatin levels down, right? So timing of these medications and over-the-counter supplements is essential, but don't worry, we discuss all of that in the list coming on the screen shortly. Here, we're specifically looking for compounds that are known to raise norepinephrine and epinephrine levels systemically within the whole body, stimulating the central nervous system, which leads to an improvement in exercise capacity, endurance, and overall strength. It boosts the metabolism, leading to increased energy levels throughout the day. It promotes a little bit of fat loss through lipolysis or direct fatty acid oxidation in metabolically active tissue. This is what we're after in this segment. But I also included the compounds which are known to increase norepinephrine and adrenaline levels in the brain, where it promotes appetite suppression. But these are mostly antidepressants, as well as attention deficit hyperactivity disorder medications, which there's a little bit of caution to be advised because you need to taper up the dosages and need to taper down the dosages when you're ready to come off. So again, antidepressants and ADHD medication are probably the last feasible option if you want appetite suppression, especially considering we have GLP-1s, GIP, and glucagon combination medications, which get the job done just as well. So here are the Half-Natty approved norepinephrine and epinephrine boosters. Both yohimbine and ribosine increase norepinephrine and epinephrine levels by blocking the alpha-2 adrenergic receptors systemically, but predominantly in the adipose tissue of the lower back. Guanfacine is now confirmed to be approved to increase norepinephrine and epinephrine levels both systemically as well as in the brain, which was specified in the summary of major modifications and explanatory notes under the stimulant section. And then there's atipamezole, also known as antisedan, which is actually being used as an alternative stimulant because it's not included in the WADA prohibited list up until now. But atipamezole is primarily used as a veterinary medication to reverse the effects of sedative drugs like medetomidine or dexmedetomidine. Atipamezole is a selective alpha-2 adrenergic receptor antagonist, raising norepinephrine levels quite substantially to reverse the effects of these sedative drugs. But if you don't take sedative drugs, then the increase in norepinephrine is quite substantial. I'll tell you that, but not talking from personal experience, just talking or regurgitating from what I've heard of people using this stimulant as an alternative because it's not included in the prohibited list. Again, there's synephrine, which is on the monitoring program, which stimulates the adrenergic receptors and thus increase the release of norepinephrine and epinephrine systemically. You can also do vigorous exercise. Yeah, great way to increase your norepinephrine and epinephrine levels. Cold exposure, also a great way to do the same thing. Caffeine increases norepinephrine and epinephrine levels. Then there's phenylethylamine for its known mood-enhancing and appetite-suppressing properties due to an increase in norepinephrine and dopamine levels within the brain. Rhodiola rosea, an adaptogen that increases norepinephrine levels and serotonin levels in the brain, which can contribute to potentially reducing appetite, especially under stressful situations. There's L-tyrosine and L-dopa coming from Mucana prurines. L-tyrosine and L-dopa both are the building blocks for norepinephrine and dopamine, which can be increased with supplementation, but primarily in the brain. And it's not really known to have a potent appetite-suppressing or stimulatory properties, but it may help with focus, mental clarity, under stress or when you try to get a boatload of work done. So supplementing with L-tyrosine or L-dopa, preferably L-tyrosine, around workouts is something you can get away with for an enhanced mental clarity while you're trying to get the job done. There are norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors. The details are on the screen. There are serotonin norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors. The details are on the screen. Tricyclic antidepressants also on the screen. And monoamine oxidase inhibitors. This one, trinyl C-promine, also known as Parnate, has a structure similar to amphetamine. So based on my research, I haven't tried it personally, but trinyl C-promine, also known as Parnate, might offer the most stimulatory effects of all of these WADA-approved reuptake inhibitors inhibitors that are on the screen right now. Just make sure that you do a little bit of additional research because some of them might be more stimulatory than others. They're not included. And usually compounds that are not included means that your mileage might vary. And a little bit of caution is advised because, well, with these kinds of antidepressants or reuptake inhibitors, you need to escalate the dosage upwards and taper them downwards because otherwise you get horrible withdrawal symptoms, as I got by taking the fluvoxamine out at one point or another. Cold turkey. Can't recommend it. Don't do what I did. It was brutal. And with that out of the way, all of these reuptake inhibitors or antidepressants increase norepinephrine and epinephrine levels in the brain, which might promote appetite suppression with prolonged use. So the tesofensine is prohibited, but again, plenty of alternatives on the list. Pick what you like and do additional research. Now, I also fully understand that you might be after increasing norepinephrine or epinephrine levels, whether that's systemically or within the brain. You want some hardcore stimulants interacting with the same receptors, whether they increase norepinephrine levels or epinephrine levels systemically or in the brain or not. So here are the Half-Natty approved stimulants, ephedrine and pseudoephedrine, but only microdoses, as is listed on the screen based on the clause of the WADA prohibited list of 2025. Ephedrine, when detected in urine, should be less than 10 micrograms per 1 milliliter, and pseudoephedrine should be less than 150 micrograms per 1 milliliter. So make sure you stay hydrated and dilute your urine as much as you can while supplementing with ephedrine or pseudoephedrine. Canna extract, good stimulant, found in many pre-workouts and nootropics formula produced by Gorelamide, linked down below. N-phenytyl dimethylamine citrate, forskolin extract, pyridoxine extract, nicotine included in the 2025 monitoring program under 4 stimulants, but still allowed to be used at whatever dosage you prefer, whether those are cigarettes, patches, cigars, or gum, right? It's entirely up to you. Green tea extract, mileage might vary, but it's not included, so you have the green light to use it. Dimethylethylamine, abbreviated to DMEA, not DMAA, but DMEA, is still approved. Again, the secret is in the abbreviations. Theophylline is approved. Isopropyl norcinephrine is approved. It's a little bit more potent than synephrine itself. Again, synephrine included on the monitoring program under 4 stimulants. Ribosine, yohimbine, dihexa, which has stimulatory properties if you take a little bit higher than recommended dosages, so let's say 10 to 20 milligrams daily, whereas usually we recommend to cycle through the dihexa, whether that's with Nupept or the banned bromantane or modafinil or Ritalin or Adderall, whatever you prefer. Dihexa is not listed, so you can still get away with it, and with continuous use, it acts as a very potent stimulant. Yeah, so do additional research. And then there's 9-MeBC, which also can have potent stimulatory properties when you take it for longer periods of time, which is generally not recommended. And we're going to skip over the narcotics, the cannabinoids, and the glucocorticoids, because at least with the narcotics or the glucocorticoids, I don't see a valid reason to use them in any way, shape, or form when you're into health and fitness, because, well, the health implications can be quite deleterious, especially with prolonged use. And again, if you suffer from some sort of inflammatory condition where you need glucocorticoids, then you're probably better at recovering and resting at home. And when it comes to cannabinoids, weed particularly, it probably lowers your performance, lowers your libido. And again, if you want to smoke a joint here and there after a competition when you're no longer subject to drug testing, go for it. But in my opinion, it has no place in sports. But if you want to smoke some weed or take some THC gummies recreationally, then go for it. Unfortunately, it's not WADA approved. Moving on to P1, the beta blockers, which are prohibited in particular sports. So in competition, the use of beta blockers, which are listed, including but not limited to, right? Archery, automobile sports, billiards, darts, golf, mini golf, shooting, and underwater sports. And does motorboating count? In competition, the use of beta blockers in these particular sports is banned, and out of competition, it's also banned for archery, shooting, and again, underwater sports. So that includes the ones that we generally use here in the fitness community, nebivolol and propranolol. I don't really know any other beta blockers that people generally use in the bodybuilding or fitness space. But since bodybuilding and strength sports and all the sports that we kind of group in the fitness community are not listed here, the use of beta blockers is technically allowed, so at least you can prevent left ventricular hypertrophy and also use these beta blockers to keep your heart rate and blood pressure under control. But we're not done yet. There's a boatload more options for Half-Natty approved blood pressure management, including daily fasted cardio. Yeah, I'm sure you guys want to shoot me for mentioning the daily fasted cardio yet again. There's these over-the-counter supplements that help with blood pressure management. Beetroot extract, carditone, L-citrulline, garlic extract, hawthorn berry extract, potassium, magnesium, melatonin, and taurine. You can look into, again, the beta blockers, nebivolol and propranolol, which are not prohibited for anything that falls under the bandwagon of what we consider health and fitness. And then all of these angiotensin-converting enzyme inhibitors are fully WADA approved still in 2025. That's benazepril, captopril, enalapril, lisinopril, perindopril, quinapril, and ramipril. All of these angiotensin 2 receptor blockers are completely WADA approved in 2025. Azilsartan, candasertan, irbesartan, losartan, olmesartan, telmisartan, that basically everybody runs in the fitness community nowadays, even when they don't need it. But we'll leave that story for another video. Valsartan, and then there's these calcium channel blockers, which are generally not used in the fitness community unless medically prescribed. Still WADA approved in 2025. Let's see how many of these I'm going to butcher. Lodipine, diltiazem, isradipine, felodipine, nicardipine, nifedipine, and verapamil. But luckily, everybody in the fitness community knows about and can pronounce these phosphodiesterase 5 inhibitors. That's sildenafil, better known as Viagra, tadalafil, better known as Cialis, or vardenafil, better known as Levitra, right? We use this for pumps in the gym, pumps in the bedroom, and potential blood pressure management as a warm and welcome side effect. And it unfortunately brings the WADA-approved prohibited list to a close, but it doesn't mean that I'm done with my list. So let's move over to the Half-Natty approved dopamine receptor agonists. Cabergoline, not listed. Bromocriptine, not listed. Pramipexole, not listed. And if you need to use these to bring your prolactin levels down because you're smoking too much weed, taking too much kratom, and take L-tyrosine supplementations to bring your dopamine levels up, which lowers your prolactin levels, especially if you take that in combination with vitamin B6, P5P, which works synergistically to convert L-tyrosine into dopamine, reducing your prolactin levels. If you don't know how to do that, then, well, we have these Half-Natty approved dopamine receptor agonists, which, again, make sure you do blood work because you don't want to use these for longer periods of time. If your prolactin levels are reduced enough for you to have killer boners and amazing sex, whether that's in or out of competition, right? You don't need to overdo it and stimulate your heart unnecessarily to the point no beta blocker on the planet is going to keep your heart rate down. Half-Natty approved thyroid medications. Yes, thyroxine T4. Triiodothyronine, T3, 3,5-diodothyronine, better known as T2, and then sobaterone GS1, which interacts with the thyroid receptors and might be a better alternatives than T3 because sobaterone doesn't stimulate your heart rate and, again, doesn't force you to rely on beta blockers to keep your heart rate down. So sobaterone, probably in combination with mirabegron, should be a great fat burner option. Half-Natty approved melanocortin receptor agonists, melanotan 2 and PT141. Melanotan 2 obviously leads to tanning if you use it intelligently, like I mentioned on the screen. And PT141 might result in tanning also if you overdo it, especially if you use it daily. But it's a great way to boost your libido and enhance your intercourse session. Again, in and out of competition doesn't really matter because both melanotan 2 and PT141, also known as Vyleesi, completely WADA approved in 2025. Here are the Half-Natty approved neuroplasticity and neurogenesis medications. We have Semax. I have a deep dive on that. We have Selank. I have a deep dive on that. We have cerebrolysine. I have a deep dive on that, and another deep dive dropping very soon, because my cerebrolysine experiment lasting 2 months, 5 milliliters per day, has finally concluded. All I need to do is compare it to Cortexin and then see which one is better comparing cerebrolysine to Cortexin. And again, Cortexin you can give a try for neuroplasticity and neurogenesis. Fluvoxamine or vortioxetine. Currently, I'm running fluvoxamine. I experimented with vortioxetine. Both are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, and with prolonged use really promoted neurogenesis in the brain. It is said, based on scientific evidence, that vortioxetine is a lot more potent than fluvoxamine. But, 2.5 milligrams to 5 milligrams vortioxetine destroyed my libido and prevented my penis from raising to its maximum capacity, even in combination with the tadalafil PT141 and, all kinds of incentives from my wife. So vortioxetine, never again, not even once, but fluvoxamine doesn't seem to have any negative effect on my libido and erectile quality. So that's the one that I'm currently using. And make sure you incrementally build up the dosages of selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors and look into the drug interactions with all of the other compounds, because they might be cytochrome P450 inhibitors. Again, Noopept potentiates neurogenesis, Dihexa potentiates neurogenesis, and even Piracetam potentiates neurogenesis. But Piracetam might be banned under 4-phenylpiracetam, which is included in the WADA prohibited list of 2025. But we're only using the tried and proven medical piracetam, not this variant of 4-phenylpiracetam. So fingers crossed, technically, on paper, it's still allowed to potentiate neurogenesis and neuroplasticity. And then we have the Half-Natty approved leftovers, all of the medications, drugs, performance-enhancing drugs, over-the-counter supplements, compounds that I couldn't classify in previous segments mentioned earlier in this video. So we have RU58841, sounds like a robot straight out of Star Wars, but actually it's a topical anti-androgen that men use to prevent hair loss alongside their minoxidil, ketoconazole, which are also not listed, and dutasteride or finasteride applied topically, also not listed. Human menopausal gonadotropin, which you might feel for human chorionic gonadotropin, because HMG contains trace amounts of HCG, but you're primarily after the follicle-stimulating hormone. But I would rather go with recombinant follicle-stimulating hormone, Merck, Gonal F, instead. Oxytocin, a great way to enhance your leg day, but also a great way to improve your libido and enhance the bonding with your partner. Delta sleep-inducing peptide, a great way to help you fall asleep and stay asleep and sleep longer at higher quality. ARA290, also known as sibonactide, which is an erythropoietin receptor agonist, but it doesn't have any erythropoietic effects. So even though it's derived from erythropoietin and not specifically mentioned in the WADA prohibited list, it's mostly effective in treating neuropathic conditions. So if you have some sort of nerve pain or a nerve trauma, a combination of ARA290 and perhaps cerebrolysine or Cortexin is a great way to attempt to recover nerve function in particular areas. Phenibut and gabapentin also helps with sleep. Epithalon, a great way to increase the telomere length of your DNA and has some anti-aging properties. KPV, peptides that help with the health of your gut microbiome. LO37, also known as cathelicidin antimicrobial peptides, which helps to, it's basically an injectable antimicrobial and antibacterial agent. If you want to reset your gut microbiome, then LO37 is the way to go. Isotretinoin, also known as Accutane and tretinoin, whether that's oral or topically, a great way to get your acne under control. Injectable glutathione, probably the best antioxidant you can take to minimize the oxidative stress that you potentiate from high-level exercise, probably in combination with performance-enhancing drugs, which the combination of exercise and performance-enhancing drugs increases oxidative stress because you're training at such a higher capacity, and thus you might need some injectable glutathione or at least N-acetylcysteine to provide the building blocks to produce glutathione within the liver and other parts of the body. Injectable glutathione is probably the second best antioxidant you can take after melatonin. Ezetimibe, to keep your lipids under control by preventing the absorption of dietary cholesterol and promoting the excretion of cholesterol from the liver. If you can't get the job done with ezetimibe, then there's always statins. The details are on the screen. Or red yeast rice. The details are on the screen. If you have digestive issues because you take too much oral steroids or ancillaries or over-the-counter supplements and your digestive tract is kind of in turmoil, maybe a temporary use of a proton pump inhibitor to reduce your stomach acid and heal your intestinal lining and your stomach lining with oral glutamine. Petosan polysulfate sodium injections to help with the lubrication of your joints. Orlistat, also known as Xenical or Ali, to act as a lipase inhibitor within the intestinal tract and prevent the breakdown of fats. When you do go ham at the hotel buffet, you eat way too much fat, then this prevents you from fat gain. In combination with Garcinia cambogia, that helps to bind up all of the fat that you're now not absorbing, and thus you have some sort of fat-specific super fiber that helps to excrete all of it the next day, making your bathroom experience a lot less messy. Botox, anybody? Also not included. BAM15, a mitochondrial uncoupler that can be used as an alternative for DNP, even though I'm not a fan. And then there's adipotide, fat-targeted pro-apoptotic peptides, which is a great way to get yourself into kidney failure because if adipotide goes systemic after subcutaneous injections straight into the fat that you want to dissolve, if that goes systemic, it will go to the heart, create apoptosis there, and then go into the kidneys, create apoptosis there. So if you're in a hurry to exit the game, then adipotide is probably the best way to do so. Now, I'm sure I forgot a compound here or there. Let me know if I forgot a WADA-approved drug, medication, over-the-counter supplement, performance-enhancing drugs, however you want to classify it. If I forgot something that's not included in the WADA prohibited list and is thus WADA-approved next year, let us know down below. Let us know the dosage ranges as I let you guys know the dosage ranges and the ideal timing to use these particular compounds to get the maximum effect. Things to pay attention to, whether they're cytochrome P450 enzyme inhibitors or have some sort of other drug interactions. I would love to know about it. I spent hours and hours and hours researching and, well, 3 days to record this video. So the next time I make a WADA-approved doping stack of 2025, it's just going to be the changes. Because this video, I wanted not to turn into a 2-hour behemoth, but I think I accidentally did. Okay, I'll leave it here. If you're looking for sources for any of these over-the-counter supplements that I discussed on this video, head over to my website, vigoroussteve.com. You can also find the rates for consultations and personalized advice by emails or ebooks, right? All of my services are listed on my website. Follow some of my sponsors and affiliates. They're all linked down below in case you want to save yourself some money while shopping online. Right? All the supplements that I discussed in this video are already listed down below with discount codes. And if you're thinking about doing your blood work, which you should be doing frequently, especially if you use any of these over-the-counter supplements, compounds, drugs, or medications that we discussed in these videos, or if you're looking for male health and hormone optimization, look no further than Merck Health. They have excellent patient care coordinators and healthcare providers who can help you interpret your blood work results. I have 2 separate blood work panels over at Merck Health, a short one and a very extensive long one. And if you're looking for, again, health optimization or hormone optimization, pick and choose, discuss the results with a healthcare provider and see what kind of recommendations they have to optimize your blood work, optimize your health parameters, and get you feeling good again. Thank you guys so much for watching. You can find everything else that I'm associated with down below in the YouTube description section. Again, follow me on Instagram. I don't have a TikTok, so just follow me on Instagram. Vigorous Crew, you guys know what to do. A super anabolic, WADA-approved front double bicep for you guys. I'm using a little bit more than what is approved, but, well, don't expect to look this big, just sticking to the guidelines that WADA has set out for you. All right, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.